Hey everyone, welcome to our latest happy hour that we're having here on Dev Radio, where we are going to try something completely different. We are going to show you a lot of really cool Azure Pipeline demos and hopefully just show you a lot of different perspectives, a lot of different things that you can do with Azure Pipelines. I'm Sydney Andrews. If you've been watching our webinar series on getting started with Azure Pipelines, even though we focused on .NET developer topics in our webinar series, the things we may show you today may not necessarily be within that same topic. I have a great group with me today, and I want to give everybody an opportunity to introduce themselves because I could do no one to do justice. So, I think do y'all want to go in a clockwise order based on the screen? All right, let's go. Yeah, you can start, Paul.
Hi, everybody. My name is Paul Yu. I work as a Azure Cloud Solution Architect at Microsoft, based in the LA area, supporting pretty much customers up and down the West Coast.
All right, I'll go next. I'm Stacy. I'm an app dev architect at the Detroit MTC. So Microsoft Technology Centers, we get customers in and help them with architecture for their systems and solving all kinds of cool problems. And been around Microsoft since 1992.
Hey everyone, my name is Suresh Paulraj. I'm a cloud solution architect. My focus area is data and AI. I'm with Microsoft for 6 years. I'm based in Orange County area.
And the last one. Hey everyone, I'm Arnab Banerjee, working the same team as Paul for our Microsoft education customers. I'm a cloud solution architect focusing on all of Azure, but really first love is DevOps and app dev. So really happy to be here with everyone today, chat a little bit about that. I'm actually based out of the Dallas area.
Thanks everyone for introducing yourselves. So we have a lot in a short amount of time, and what we're going to do is we're going to try to run through 3 or 4 demos. It just depends on how much time we have today. For those who did not attend our webinar series, I always like to kick off by just doing a really quick 10 at most 15-minute demo, just walk you through some of the stuff we covered in the webinars. Everybody that's on this call basically probably haven't seen the webinar before. So I'm expecting, because everybody's job titles sound way more important than mine, a lot of really interesting feedback. I'm going to call it feedback that we're going to get today. So just as our first kickoff example, because this is just how much fun we're going to have here, we have our msusdev examples GitHub repo. If you've been doing any of our webinars on Dev Radio, you've probably seen this GitHub organization before, msusdev examples. I'll pop the link up for anybody who wants it. We have our .NET console application that we've been using for all of our demos. It's just a really nice template repository. So if I click use this template, it's March 16th. So I'll just create a repo called March 16 public repo from that template, just copying down that main branch. And this gives me a really simple console app to do my demo today. And essentially what we've done is we have this really simple console application that's designed to be CLI. So just to show you what that looks like, I'm just going to pop this open in GitHub Codespaces. Mostly just to show that you could just run edit all of this in your browser. Let's see, it's gonna pop this open, image found, container built. And obviously if I didn't want to do this in GitHub Codespaces, I can always just clone this to my local machine. It's gonna work just fine. I have VS Code, I have my settings synced. So I expect a pretty similar experience across both. Here we go. Have GitHub Codespaces spun up. My bash console. So this is a console project that prints out information for a office space rental site. So if I hit .NET Run, just print out all the available buildings and then the different offices that are available in each building and how many seats they have available and their monthly rate. And the really the really simplest way to demo this is I can use the CLI to filter based on the amount of seats I want to show. So if I only want to show places that have at least 2 seats, I can put seats 2. I can do that seats 4, filter down to things with no more than 4 seats and seats 5. And if you're not that familiar with C Sharp, the way I did this is with a really cool package called System Command Line Dragonfruit. And what it does is it reads the parameters for your main method, and then it turns those into command line parameters. So it allows you to build a CLI really quick. And so with this, I mean, if we're going to pop this into Azure Pipelines, we're just going to create a build.yaml script with the name pretty much being arbitrary, and just a pull in a VM image, go to latest. And then I know you could do like really flat. And again, I'm gonna throw this to the group. I have never done the single stage, single job syntax that's really flat. I've always defined out all my stages manually. In practice, what do you see this doing in the demo? Like, are they doing that single job, single stage syntax, or are they building out as explicitly as possible every single individual stage, every single individual job?
Yeah, I would say I see more people doing what you're doing now, just kind of thinking about it in a more organized way and a more modular way. It's kind of that's kind of what I see anyway.
Yeah, same here. When I'm like coaching customers through building that pipeline, always start off with the whole the structure of the YAML and making sure that they understand stages, jobs, tasks, right? That way it just makes it easier than trying to go undo it later on.
Yeah, it's one of those things. I know the syntax exists, but I cannot remember exactly what part you're supposed to flatten. So it's easier just to spell it all out. In a webinar, we walk everybody through just pulling container images for Docker Hub. So I think I pulled in .NET SDK 6.0, and then we just do a simple script. I think it's .NET run display name run .NET application. Just trying to get people in good habit, always adding a display name in case somebody's coming behind your YAML later. So first YAML, I commit that. And since this is Azure Pipelines, I'm just committing a YAML file to GitHub. Nothing's really happening. I need to go to dev.azure.com. I'm going to create a new project called March 16. It's just a public project, and I've already spun up and then the term escapes me right now. Parallel agents. So I've already spun up parallel agents, set all that up. So I'll create a pipeline connected to GitHub. Go to all repositories. Oh, I actually grabbed the wrong repository. Let me go back. I'm clicking too fast. Create pipeline. GitHub. Filter all repositories. There we go. March 16 here. And then I have an existing Azure Pipelines YAML file. And there's my YAML. If I hit run, everything should just flat out work. Now, barring any YAML syntax errors, right? The YAML linter, I've built YAML files in Visual Studio before, but I don't know if there is an Azure Pipelines YAML linter available for Visual Studio Code. Has anybody seen one?
Yeah, I don't know either. I typically use the little assistant that's right in Azure DevOps, but then that's kind of cheating, right?
I don't think it is.
No, I'm just kidding. Yeah.
There actually is a linter, and I've installed it a while ago. It took me a while to do that. But there is a linter. I would say when you're getting started with writing Azure pipelines, I personally like using the actual Visual Studio web interface, because then it gives you like the GUI components, right? Like you can click settings right above a task, and you can kind of see what should go into that particular task and whatnot.
So I'm gonna try this out. I installed the Azure Pipelines extension. This is where we're actually trying things real time, right? And I
Yep.
switched my file, and this is cool if you're developing, and it's just not recognizing the right language. Auto detect is your normal language mode. You can just switch it to anything. So I just switched it from YAML to Azure Pipelines here. So I should get a lot more assistance. So I mean, if everything worked correctly, if I hit run .NET application, it just ran the console application. So normally in a webinar, I would walk through using .NET Publish to create a single file executable, and that looks like .NET Publish, configuration, release, output folder, out. After that, just check my notes. We want to make it self-contained, so you don't have to have .NET installed on the machine. But then you have to specify runtime, Windows x64, and then publish single file. So I'm overriding the publish single file setting in the CS project file. So this should just publish .NET console app. And then the next step will just be publishing that as a build artifact. So out contoso.spaces.console.exe. And if I didn't know the name, I could just go pop over the terminal. I'm going a little bit faster because 15 minutes, right? .NET publish, configuration, release, output out. It'll be Contoso Spaces console. Now, obviously, I want a self-contained runtime, Windows x64, publish, single file equals true. Go ahead and delete all that, right? And then just see what it gives me as the output. And I'm going to stop there. Just give it a second to publish this. Because you can go further. Like you can include the XML comments in the exe. You can include the debug symbols. Right now, you just get 3 files, really. So single file is a misnomer. But you get your executable, you get your debug symbols, and then you get your comments. So that's good enough. So we have all that. We're going to grab that out Contoso Spaces console.exe, and I'm just going to create an artifact called console.exe. And I mean, we could do the same thing if we're building a NuGet package. So script .NET pack. This one should be easier. Output pkg. And then this one, I believe, we want to specify the version. Now, I know I wouldn't hard code a version normally. You know, we're using variables and stuff here, right? I don't know if anybody has any guidance, white papers, recommendations for best practices on Simver, but that's semantic version is just it's always eluded me. It's just something really difficult to figure out. I don't know if anybody on here, you know, has some success there.
I think there's some guidance on our docs site. Mike tried to pull up that link.
Yeah, if you got the link, please, you know, pull it up. If you send it me in the chat, I'll share it with everybody on YouTube. Yeah, but semantic versioning, and I talked about this on a webinar. It always eluded me as really difficult to figure out how to do that in a YAML workflow. I'll call this artifact NuGet package. We got this right. Build 2 artifacts, right? Sync that up. Should kick off a new pipeline run. There we go. That new pipeline run should build the .NET Publish to create the exe. And there we go. We just got the C# documentation for semantic versioning. I'm gonna pop that up for anybody on YouTube who wants to go to there. Let's see.
Yeah, and the upshot of it is the major, minor, and patch, and they kind of give guidance on when you do which. So if something is backward compatible versus not backward compatible, and so on.
Oh, absolutely. And so what this should do is just build out your exe. You can distribute that on something like GitHub releases. It builds out your NuGet packages. You can push that to NuGet.org. I only got 15 minutes, so I'm not going to walk through all of that. But for anybody who's watching this and say, I want to see what that looks like when you push it to NuGet.org, we have another video on this channel that we pushed out last week where we do exactly that. We built this pipeline. We published it to NuGet. We published that the NuGet package. new package to NuGet.org, and we pushed this to GitHub releases. So like that was my Azure Pipelines demo. That's what we've been working through through the whole webinar series. So people who missed our webinar, if you like that, that was just a taste of the 3 hours of work we do in the Azure Pipelines. And at the end of the day, we pushing everything to Azure Container Apps. So that's just the fun stuff about that. I know other people on this call wanted to be able to show off their own demos. Anybody want to volunteer to show off their demo first? Let me hide this link from the screen real quick.
Sure, I can go.
I could go. Oh, go for it, Arnab.
Did I beat you to that, Paul?
Yep, go for it. You got it.
Okay, so let me see if I can share my screen real quick. That was pretty fun stuff, Sydney. One thing I'm curious for everyone on the call too, and for those tuning in, is YAML versus classic pipelines. What do you see customers still using? And generally, we always recommend YAML because of the obvious benefit of version. It becomes part of your code. It can be version controlled. But the visual also has its benefits because it's just easier to pull in tasks, represented, build it up quickly. So I was curious what y'all have seen with customers that you work with, and what's the latest on that?
I tell you, I see more YAML than not, but occasionally, and it's always, I don't know, maybe this is just, my spider sense goes off a little bit when I see people using classic pipelines as to kind of where they are in the process. Sometimes it's because it's an old one that they just still have laying around. But when they start building new with classic, there are still occasions where people do that and then convert to YAML just because it's easy. But I do wonder when, like I said, my spider sense goes off a little bit when it's like, oh no, we're not doing that YAML thing. That's too hard, because they do ignore the benefits then.
Yeah, we even
Cool.
got people in the audience who are saying YAML. I'm seeing more YAML now than it went than even a year or two ago, simply because the classics editor was just so easy to use. It's hard to not use it. But with so many companies using both GitHub and Azure DevOps, it's kind of easier to take a team and say, okay, let's learn one language, one way to do this. The syntax might be a little bit different, but the knowledge that you gain, and if you look at things like the runners and stuff like that, a lot of that overlaps. So that kind of shared knowledge between both platforms really helps out. So let's see, Arnab, let's see that you have your screen up. I'm going to let you just go out with this demo. Have a lot of fun.
Alrighty, thanks. So what I wanted to share with everybody is this idea of API ops. We tend to attach some ops to every new term. It seems like we've got GitOps, we got regular DevOps, and then DevSecOps. So one of the things that's come up quite frequently in customer conversations is around, Azure API management, or API management as general is a pretty popular topic in today's enterprises and institutions, just because of the whole shift towards microservice-based and API-based architecture. One of the challenges that often now comes up with API management workflows is it's a little bit of a unique situation where the traditional CI/CD DevOps pipeline does not necessarily always work as a full solution when you're trying to automate the process of getting your APIs published to API management. And the reason behind that is it actually needs kind of a two-way sync, meaning that if I switch over to my API management here, so I have an API management instance provision in Azure. I want to be able to represent this entire state of all my configurations and APIs in version control. But then I also want to be able to do the reverse, meaning that I should be able to commit changes. Let me flip back here. To my version control, just like I would do with any regular application or infrastructure as code, and then be able to push that back into API management, right? So it requires that two-way sync. So our national CSA team has done a pretty awesome job of building out this starter solution, which they're calling API Ops. And that's where I was a little earlier. And I'll share this link out so we can share this with the audience. And we have a full workshop that you can actually take. It'll take about less than an hour to spin the whole thing up. But essentially, the crux of the solution is, as API developers, you can design and create using your open API or Swagger specs, and publish that into a Git repository. And then there's some pipelines that you can run in Azure DevOps or GitHub, and it will essentially create automatically once you do a PR, and then you approve the PR, it gets reviewed and approved, and it merges. You have a job that runs, extracts information from the repository, and puts it into API management. Now, what's interesting is it also supports that reverse workflow I was talking about, meaning that you can take an existing API management instance and run what's called an extractor pipeline that will extract information out of your existing API management instance and resync it back into repository. Now, this is super useful because although we always, say that the recommended practice is you always start code first, whether it's provisioning infrastructure, deploying applications, you don't want to go to what's in production and make a change. The reality is, in many situations with API management, it's just easier to look at the kind of visual in a portal, set up your API, set up policies, and all those kinds of cool things. If I personally find it easier to do it here, and it's quicker for me than to always have to represent it in code first, and hence the need for that two-way. So let's take a quick look at what I would call the day two experience from a customer perspective, what this would look like. So right now, I have an API management instance, which you're seeing here. And I have this represented all in configuration in my Azure repos, right? So you can see I have this demo conference API and two other APIs. One is an on-prem API, and this is in sync. All of that information has already been represented because I've done that pre-work of getting this in sync just for the sake of the demo. Now, I go in here and start adding something. So let's add an API here. Let's see if it's... For some reason, I wonder if it's my computer that's acting a little slow. I wonder if going off video might make it a little better.
Yeah, let's see. We can turn it off and turn it back on this end. I don't know if that helps.
I don't know. Let me just quickly disable my camera and see if that helps it a little bit. Okay.
There you go.
All right. Y'all can still see something, right?
Yeah.
Let's see it.
Okay, perfect. All right, so let's add just a regular HTTP API. And for the purposes of this demo, we don't need to necessarily always have a backing API. What's cool about API management, which you'll get to see here, is you can actually just have a mock API front end that you can also call, right? Which is really useful if you have front end, back end teams, and the back end team may be building out their own cadence, but you can have a JSON mock response for the front end to actually develop against, which is super cool. Okay, so we'll just call this mock API. I don't have a backend here, so I'll just call it localhost for now. Doesn't matter if I can spell. And we'll just say mock API. I'll go ahead and create this, maybe just put it in a product.
Hardest thing to do is spelling live on YouTube.
That's the hardest thing. That's the real test. Okay, so I have a mock API created. I want to go ahead and add an operation. So let's say we're going to say a welcome message to everybody on the call today, and we'll say welcome. And that's the endpoint. And for my response, I'm just going to add a default response here. I'm just going to say 200 OK, and the response is going to be of type application JSON. And over here, I can actually put in a sample. So I'm just going to put in a message here. Give me 1 second. I'm just going to put a default JSON body that says, hello, app dev friends. And I'm going to save this. Now, what I need to do to make this mock work is add in a mocking policy. So if I go into my snippets here, these are all the types of various policies and API management that you can use. The one that we're interested in is the mock response. And it's going to be a 200 response code. And the content type should be application JSON. And what I want here is this to be an inbound policy so that when the request comes in, API management actually just gives me that default response back. I'm just going to save that. I have mocking enabled on this API. Let's quickly test this to make sure this actually returns us something. So I'm just going to, within the portal, you can see I'm getting a response back with our message. Now, back to our problem. Now, the problem is that I've just added something in the API management portal, and it's no longer in sync with what I have in version control. So we are in that out of sync situation. So from a day 2 experience, it's as simple as coming into my pipelines, and we'll go into the solution how this is happening, but take a look at how easy it is. I have this run extractor job, right? All I need to do, I can kick off this pipeline, and it's gonna ask me for some information for my APIM instance. So these are essentially params or parameters in my YAML for that pipeline. It needs the resource group where my API management is. And then also, it needs to create a pull request so that it actually, whatever delta it finds, it needs to create a pull request. I can review that before it actually syncs it with my repository, which is a very important step. So let's kick this off and see what happens. All right, so you can see there are actually 2 stages here. The first is it's going to run, it's pulling some stuff from artifacts where I've already published the creator module that has the logic to push changes, as well as the extractor model, which we're running now, right? So the YAML is actually pulling these components when it runs that pipeline. Let's go back into our pipeline. So you can see that we're running this. And take a quick look here. So the download extractor step is actually directly from the artifacts feed that I'd set up. And it's now running the actual tool. And this is really a C# application that calls underneath the hood all of your APIM ARM APIs to get all of that information, package it as a solution, and then automatically, once it does that, it's going to generate a pull request with what it found. All right, so the first stage completed. It should now start the second stage. Let's wait for that.
Pretty exciting. I've seen some really awesome demos that people done where they're using a pipeline to interact with a Git repo, generate up pull requests, things like that. It's again some really amazing automations you can put in on top of your existing repositories. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, this is
All
cool because
right.
a lot of times people don't think about it this way. They think about, at least my customers tend to think about just CI/CD, but there's so much
Mhm.
more to pipelines. Just a general purpose tool. I think this is really
Yeah,
really cool.
definitely.
You should make sure
Now,
we have the link to your demo in there too.
oh yeah, certainly. Now, what's really cool? This is obviously a lot of pretty slick shell scripting that goes behind the scenes to create that pull request and then determine the deltas. The good thing from a customer perspective is this is all done, right? You don't have to do anything other than just set these pipelines up, and you're good to go. All right, so we got done with this job. So let's take a quick look at our pull request. I'm going to go into my repositories and go into pull requests. And under active, you can see the default build service user in Azure DevOps has generated this pull request for me. If I take a quick look here at my files, sure enough, you can see that this is the policy that I added, right? This was really the only change I did that's different from my repository. And here is the API spec, right? With the specification, here is my welcome endpoint, as well as the default message right here. So this is essentially what I'm now going to put back into my repository and bring both those babies in sync, right? Okay, so I'm good with these changes. Everything looks good. I'm going to go ahead and approve. So you can see the check mark, and I'm going to complete this merge, delete the branch because I have no need for it once it gets into my master branch. And if I flip back now to my master branch, here's my mock API, right? Extracted from my API management instance. If I go into this information here, you can see that it has that policy that we added, as well as the specification. This is our welcome message. So we just saw the sync from API management back to Azure Repos. So let's make a quick edit now to the repository. So now we're going the other way, the traditional CI/CD way, where I'm going to make a change in my repository and have it pushed back into APIM. So instead of this, and obviously, best practices is you should be doing this in VS Code, doing a pull request, merging to master, follow all those practices. We're short of time, so I'm going to do it on the master branch. And I'm just going to say, hello, my awesome app dev friends. This is the change. And let's go ahead and commit this. All right, so this should effectively, I have a trigger on it. So it's doing the run creator pipeline. And so this is already pushing changes to Azure as we speak. And this is a traditional CI/CD, nothing different from even what Sydney just showed. This is going the way that we know how it goes from code to prod. So no surprises here. The one difference here is now we're downloading the different Azure artifact, the one that actually pushes changes from the repository, right? And this should take maybe another 20 seconds. I think I'm doing good on time. My 15 minutes is almost up.
Well, the demo synced up with your 15 minutes almost perfectly.
All right, so go ahead.
I was going to just jump in and say the cool thing about Azure Artifacts is it supports so many different types of package feeds. So if you wanted to create the extractor and creators as something like a CLI tool, like a .NET tool, you could totally do that. And then still host it in Azure Artifacts so it's internal to your organization. but people can install that tool on the command line on their local machine to test it out. If something's funky happening, they don't know what's going on. They can just .NET tool install from the Azure Artifact speed. It'll still use the same tool that the build pipeline's using. So that's just so much
Yeah,
you can do here. It's really exciting.
absolutely. Um, okay, so this job is completed, and I'm just going to refresh my API management instance, and let's make sure that the changes actually got in. So we have the mock API, and we basically made a change. So let's just go ahead and test it. And there you go. Our changes are live.
Right.
So we went both ways. And we'll be sharing this. And Sydney, I believe you'll be able to share these links out for the audience to get at. Feel free to take this for a spin. I showed you all the Azure DevOps flow, but you can do the exact same thing with GitHub. And this documentation actually walked you through your CI/CD tool of choice, right? Take it for a spin, give us some feedback, and just let us know what you think. And if there's anything else here that we're always, open to. This is actually open source. It's on GitHub, and feel free to pull requests or raise issues, and we'll get to these as well. All right, back to you,
Paul
Sydney.
just shared the link, so I'm putting that into the chat for everybody on our live YouTube stream. Paul, I think you had next, right? So as soon as you're ready to share your screen, I will go ahead and pull it up here.
Okay. Let me see if I get this right. There we go.
Here we go. And I'm just throwing your screen up, and here we go.
Cool. All right. So what I wanted to demo is I'm working with customers. I do a lot of like infrastructure as code type engagements with customers, and Terraform is one of the tools that I really, really love to use. Terraform, and then of course pipelining that out so that you can deploy it out to your Azure subscriptions, right? One question that I always get is that question around, do I go do Classic or do I do YAML? And of course, my answer is always going to be, yeah, go with YAML, because you're going to get a lot more flexibility. Your pipeline is essentially code at that point and whatnot. And one of the, one of the things that was raised was, hey, I want to do YAML, but I hear that there isn't a good, there's no approval gate functionality, or there isn't a great way for me to kind of stage my deployments and make sure that they are only being deployed into the proper subscriptions at the right time and whatnot. And so what I wanted to do is I wanted to show how you can actually achieve that using YAML-based pipelines with the combination of environments and things like that. So I have a GitHub, I do have a GitHub repo, and I can post that in the chat in a little bit. But this is a very, very vanilla Terraform bit of code, right? And so let me just bump my screen up just a little bit.
Like I say, if you can pick up one or two more.
One or two more. Let me see. How about that?
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
Okay. So the Terraform's super simple. It's not really doing anything really. All it's doing is just creating a resource group. That's all I have, right? And the one thing about infrastructure as code and Terraform and things like that is we want to stick to the drive principle, right? Don't repeat yourself. So you want to be able to write your configuration one time and then deploy it out to your various environments. And the only things that's going to change is maybe the target subscription and then maybe some of the variables in between, right? And so super simple Terraform here, just creating a resource group. I just parameterize the name and the location in my Terraform. And the name and location are going to get fed in using these TFVARs file. I'm not going to dive a whole deeply into Terraform, but you can use a var file to pass in values. And so I have one for dev, I have one for test, and I have one for prod, right? So the goal here is to deploy a resource group into 3 different subscriptions using 3 different configurations and whatnot. Terraform has this concept of state information. It's kind of like a, I have a love-hate relationship with Terraform State, but it's something that you have to deal with, right? And so you put Terraform State, you could put it in Azure Storage Account or Terraform Cloud. I chose Azure Storage Account here. And so what I'm doing is a partial configuration, right? All I'm doing is I'm telling Terraform that, hey, my backend is going to be in Azure Storage, but I don't have all the details for you here. My details are going to be over here, right? So it's a backend configuration file. And essentially what I'm doing is I'm passing this at runtime too. So I'm telling Terraform what my parameters are going to be, and then what my storage account is going to be for keeping that deployment nice and tidy in a storage account and secure, right? So that's the entire repo. So main TF has my deployment, TF vars has my variables, and then TF backend has a pointer to the proper storage accounts. And inside of my Azure subscription, you can see I have a couple different subscriptions here. I have application 1, 2, and 3, and I have a storage account already pre-staged for this demo. So I have a dev, prod, and test. And what's going to happen is in my pipeline, it's going to deploy to each of these subscriptions, and I'm going to have a resource group there. Okay, so all this stuff is pre-staged. And let me see, if I go to pipelines, I just wired up, the starter pipeline when you're using the Visual Studio, or excuse me, the Azure DevOps UI. So if I do, let's see if I go back. So if you did new pipeline, you can essentially just point to your repo, click, just click through, say start a pipeline, and then you get this, right? Here's the one reason why I like using this editor, at least to get started, right? And it's because you have this show assistant button, and it's basically kind of like that classic editor that we were all used to before the YAML pipelines came out, right? And so you can pick certain things. So if I wanted to do like Terraform, there's a Terraform task. I'm going to use a script task, but there are, things that you can do. And the other cool thing about it is if I just drop one in, so I'll just put my cursor here and I will drop in a task, right? So you get this editor, right? So it's kind of like GUI drop down, and I'll just leave everything default and hit add. And so what it does is it adds YAML for you on the fly. And so if I needed to go back and make a change, let's say I'm not comfortable with writing YAML yet, you can just hit this little settings link. It's like a little tiny link above the task, and it'll bring up your editor again. So that's a
that's really
number one tip that I tell when I'm working with clients. Okay, so let's see. I talked about environments, and I talked about these storage account details, right? I'm going to treat these like secrets, okay? I don't want these checked into my repo. I don't want people knowing, what storage account name and whatnot. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the library section of pipelines, and I'm going to go over to secure file, and I'm going to upload a file to there. And so I'll just click through, and I'll upload each one for each of the environments, okay? And so let's see, I wish you can do this all in one shot, but I don't. You have to do one at a time.
No multi-file upload just yet, huh?
Not yet, not yet. So these are going to be treated like secrets, okay? And they're going to be downloaded during the pipeline run, okay? The next thing I want to do is in my pipeline, because we're going to deploy to multiple subscriptions, I'm going to need the pipeline to be aware of all these different subscription IDs, okay? And so what I did in the pipeline here is over in the pipeline editor, there's this variable button. And if you toggle that, you can define any variable you want. You can make them secrets. You can make them updatable at runtime, what have you. For the purpose of the demo, I'll put them here. In production, what you want to do is you want to link it out to an Azure Key Vault and pull your secrets through that way. But for the sake of time, I'll just keep it here. What I have is I have a service principal in Azure. that has the ability to deploy to my 3 subscriptions. And so I have the client ID, the client secret, the dev subscription ID, test, and prod, right? And so all that is in here, okay? The next thing I need to do before I even start writing my Terraform is I need to come here and I need to start configuring environments. And this is a pretty neat area of pipelines, which I think does not get used a whole lot, but I can create an environment, okay? I'll just call it dev. This works really well for like Kubernetes and virtual machine type environments. I hear that app service was supposed to come, but we're still waiting on that. But you don't have to choose one of these environments. You can just say none, okay? So I'll just say none, and I'll create. And let me go back, and I will just create an environment for each of the environments or subscriptions that I want to deploy into, right? So then prod, okay. Now, here's the magic. So I'm in my dev environment. If I'm thinking about my pipeline, if I'm thinking about the way I want the development team or the infrastructure team to work, is they could deploy into dev, right? No big deal. It's just a dev environment, okay? Where I do want to start putting gates in place is like in test and prod. And so I'll go into my test environment, and then I'll go to approvals and checks. And then once I'm in approvals and checks, I get a bunch of stuff available to me. And I can start to do all the things that I used to be able to do in classic pipelines, right? That's approval gates, brand control, invoking Azure functions, calling REST APIs, monitoring, right? Querying Azure Monitor, right? Stuff like that. So all this is here. It was a little hidden though. And so I'll just pick approvers because I want to put an approval gate in the front. And so I will select myself as an approver. And here's the other bit of trickery. If I were to add a second user, notice this down here, advanced. If I were to add a second user, I get a new, I guess, set of parameters I can set. And I can say whether I only need one person of my approvers or I need all the approvers, right? And so I'll take the other poll out. And so I'll create that environment. And I'll go do the same for the prod environment, okay? So prod, click this little menu, go here, and find myself, click add. Okay, so I think I'm ready. I have, my code is in place, my secure files are there. All I need to do is go write this pipeline. Now, where is my pipeline code? Because it's a fair amount of code. Hang on a second. Yeah.
While you're looking for that code, we had a really good question in the chat that somebody asked. As far as like Terraform bicep adoption in your own organizations or your clients, your customers, what are you seeing? Like, are you seeing people embrace this infrastructure as code mentality? Is this something that's still a little scary? I've done both Terraform bicep myself, and as a developer, it just seems so natural and native to me. But I want to take in a perception. I want to take in a perspective of everyone else in this group. So, what does everyone else think about that? Just try to buy you some time to get your YAML together.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll jump in on that. And I've seen a lot of both, but kind of harkening back to what Paul was saying about Terraform is that love-hate relationship with the state file. So Terraform has a lot of benefits. I mean, obviously, if you go to any Cloud Shell, like you spin up a Cloud Shell, we already have it pre-installed. That's how much we love Terraform. And, it's cross-platform and works and all these great things. But the state file is kind of a little bit of a nuisance at times. So if you're deploying to Azure, if you're going out and that's your cloud of choice and that's your target, Bicep makes it a little bit easier because when in the Bicep world, the cloud is your state file. Like it is the state. So that's the main reason I see people kind of saying, oh, even if they're already using Terraform, that's the main reason I see people making that switch is to get that Azure specific kind of feel, but with the Terraform goodness.
Yeah, I agree with that. And especially if you're an all Azure shop, it just makes sense just to stick with Bicep. Because Bicep is really close. You know, it stays very close. In fact, I think it's very much in alignment with the entire REST API. So as soon as the service comes on, you can write it in Bicep.
Yeah.
Not entirely the case with Terraform.
Yep, I agree with that as well. So if you're multi-cloud, then the story is different. But if you're in Azure, I think it makes sense.
Yeah.
And it's really easy to learn too. It's so.
All right. So I have this fairly large YAML file, and I know YAML is a little scary to look at. So what I like to do is I like to collapse things down sometimes, right? Just to make it more approachable. And so all this is doing, it's a multi-stage pipeline, very similar to the things that Sydney was showing us with the VM image. And so what I'm doing here is if I expand out the dev stage, and even that gets scary, right? So let me just collapse this down a little bit. So inside of the dev stage, I have two jobs, okay? Whenever you run Terraform, you have to do a plan and then you have to do an apply, right? And so that's all I'm doing is I'm doing the plan, and inside of the plan job, what I'm doing is I'm downloading my secure file, okay? So I'm running a task to download this backend configuration file, and then I'm running Terraform to do the initialization. What it's going to do is it's going to take my service principal and it's going to take my storage account and it's going to say, hey, I'm going to initialize the directory and I'm going to point it to this storage account in dev subscription, right? And then I'll do a plan against that. And here I'm just passing in my my ARM client credentials and secrets and subscriptions. So that's how I'm getting away with deploying to multiple subscriptions in a single pipeline. Okay. The next task, nothing special, just taking the output of this Terraform plan and then publishing up as a pipeline artifact. Okay. So let me just collapse that down. And then my next job, and when you're working with environments, a deployment job is a special job. It's a job, but it's just a special job. And so what you do is you run a deployment job and then you point it to an environment, right? So here I'm saying run it on dev, run it once because you have to give it a strategy. And we have a whole documentation around this. And what I'm doing here is I'm downloading those pipeline artifacts and then I'm basically applying the plan output, okay? So if my copy and paste work, I can literally save this file and then watch it run. So I'll save it because the trigger was based on the main branch. So it's going to detect that code has changed in the main branch. And then we can see my multi-stage pipeline it's in queue. Aha, see. So now it's in queue, but it's waiting. It's saying permissions are needed, right? So I need a granted permission. I need to let it talk to my environment. And then I also need it, allow it to download my secure file. So let me go ahead and click through that.
Paul, that's only a one-time, the first time you run it, right? And subsequently, when you run it again,
yeah,
it doesn't ask you for the same permission, right?
Yeah, and when you're defining your secure file or defining your environment, you can pre-approve it as you're creating it, so you don't have to be bothered with that. Yeah. So we'll hopefully see this thing run, and of course, it's not a good demo if it doesn't fail, right? So it had a problem retrieving keys from my storage account. So let's see, do I have the right storage account? Close that. SA Terraform dev, SA Terraform dev. And yeah, it just, did it download the job? It downloaded the backend file. Let me make sure I have my credentials right. Move that aside.
Paul, sometimes it takes a minute to get the approval go through. So if you want to try again, maybe.
Yeah, I'm gonna make sure that I have my my credentials right in the variables.
Yeah, so it looked like this, like it couldn't access the storage account based on those credentials. So
Yeah.
so the state the state file, it's what we were talking about earlier.
Yep.
Got to get to the state file. Must
Yep.
have state file.
Yeah. If it can't work with state, then let's see. Let me make sure I have my subscriptions right.
I think one of the nice things, sometimes they can be a little bit tricky or complex, but then they just kind of go. They just churn away for forever. So
For those who are watching, debugging your credentials and stuff like that, that's pretty much standard part of the process.
Yeah.
So at least you know if something goes wrong where you should look.
Yeah. So my initial thought is, hey, maybe either I don't have the storage account names correct, or my my subscription IDs or my client secrets might be fouled up. And so I move this off screen so I can make sure that I have the right values in there. And so I plug them in. And as I'm talking through that, I think what happened was Terraform dev. I'm just going to make sure one more time. Terraform dev.
yeah.
So let me just put this side by side. So that's my RG name, my storage account name, SA Terraform dev. And do I have a container? I have the container. Okay, well, let's see. Let's run this again. Let's run a new pipeline. And if this doesn't work, I can show you what it was supposed to do in another pipeline.
All right, so
Well, this is happy hour, so it's all good.
here we go.
So we're happy if it works. We're happy if it doesn't work. Good.
Yeah.
Either way, we're happy.
That's cool.
There we
Okay,
go.
it initialized.
There we go.
All right.
Those who are not familiar with Terraform, when it creates that plan is and jump in if I'm wrong here, because I do not have as much depth on Terraform as you do. But it's a folder, right, with multiple configuration files in there.
Yeah. What it does is that init, it downloads all the modules that you're referencing in your Terraform code, and it drops into a .terraform directory. So that's all the code that it needs to run. And then it'll actually run through and build out a plan. And that plan is it's a binary file. And then what you're going to do on the apply is you're going to apply that plan, right? I mean, you can run this stuff. You can just say Terraform apply auto approve, because Terraform apply does do the plan for you.
You mean YOLO?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. YOLO. Yeah. Okay, so we got past that. So it definitely was a credential issue.
I think they wanted to name it Terraform YOLO instead of Terraform Apply. So.
Yeah, that makes sense. You know, I think it's probably worth saying too, and it may have been worth doing just a whole session just on infrastructure as code, but the way that deployments work is that they attempt to be idempotent, meaning that, hey, if that resource is already there and it's configured the way you have it specified, I'm not going to mess with it.
Yep.
But if you change configuration or add a resource, that's when we'll update it. Because I get a lot of people who are worried, like, oh, well, I'm going to rerun it, but I only want to change this one thing. That's okay. It was designed for that. That's the way it's supposed to work.
Right. And that whole idempotency thing, that's why Terraform has state, and that's why Bicep just uses Azure, right? So, okay, let's see. I made it past the dev stage. Now I need to grant it permissions.
It tests these permissions.
Yeah. I should have just pre-approved it off the gate, off the bat. But what's going to happen is the plan is going to run, and then the approval gate is going to kick in. Job is pending.
The build agents are always hiding when you need them. Yeah. I should have just ran my own build agent. It's funny. I've had customers many years ago when we were first talking Azure Pipelines who were coming off of running TFS on their own hardware. And so the question always comes up, well, what do I do with my own hardware? Build agents. Lots and lots of build agents. That always gets a smile. Everybody does. Just spinning up tons of build agents and not having to it's a different type of spend, but feeling like they're getting a value out of the hardware they've already invested in.
Yeah. So the job was pending because it needed my approval, because it knew as part of the stage the test environment was in play, and so that's where I got my approval. And so if I had a real email tied to that user identity, I would have gotten an email notification as well. But here I could just approve it right from here. So I can just say approve. And then there we go. It should kick off.
So question for you, Paul, and this might be a good one for the audience as well, is you added those approvals in the environment, right, for test and prod. If you went back to your YAML, is there anything that indicates, if you were just looking at the YAML, that, hey, there is an approval for this specific step? Or I'm sure there's a reference to the environment in the YAML, right?
There is reference to the environment in the YAML, and that is going to be in the deployment job. So my deployment job was called apply for all my stages. And here I'm pointing to an environment. But it's not obvious that the environment's going to require an approval. And so that won't be written into the code. If you need it to be written into the code, there is a task, there's a manual validation task that you can insert into your YAML, and it can do the same thing.
Perfect. Yep, that's exactly what I was curious about, is if you had the manual validation in there, or the YAML is not actually directly alluding to the fact that there is an approval needed.
Yeah, it's just that the environment is a little bit more flexible because you have all the tooling, right, that we were used to in the classic pipeline.
Yeah.
So I guess the next question is are we going to end up seeing environment definitions as code? Like, you can go in and you can define it. What if you're changing it over time and you want to kind of keep track of those changes over time? it'd be nice to be able to say, oh, let's save that environment definition off to our repo so that we can go and modify it later.
Yeah.
Some environment YAML, Stacy.
Environment, yeah.
I'm curious because you could do a lot with the Azure DevOps CLI, or the REST API. But yeah, that would be. I wonder, can I export any of these? No.
No,
I don't think I can.
You can only add resources and change security on.
Yeah, so I think you can script it out if you wanted to. So as it stands now, it seems like it would be a bit of a work to represent everything, but it can be done with using the REST APIs or the AZ DevOps package in the CLI.
Okay, so as it's building out prod, what I have now is my dev environment with the only artifact is my Terraform plan. And then I have a test environment with also the Terraform plan, but also one check pass. So this kind of has that record that I approved it. And then if I flip back over to my Azure, and if I look at my resource groups, I see a happy hour dev that's deployed into the application 1 subscription. I have test in the application 2 subscription. And then as soon as this finishes, I should see a prod resource group. And that's it. And this is initially when YAML pipelines came out. I would say, hey, you know what? Classic is still good, right? Still supported. It has a lot of features, but I mean, with the addition of environments and being able to put in approval gates and checks and things like that, it just makes it, that much more compelling just to jump to the YAML side already.
And there's also, I think, one added advantage of environments that may not have been super obvious from Paul's demo, but at scale, suppose you're deploying tens to 50 or 100 applications every day across different environments to dev, test, prod. How do you answer the question as a DevOps or release as SRE person that, hey, these are all the applications I deployed to test today, right? You don't want to have to go into every individual release and figure out what jobs failed and succeeded across every hundreds of repositories. You can go to your environment and it's going to give you the history of across all of your repos that are using or leveraging environments, which I think is really cool.
One of the other things for me that's the big selling point for environments for me has been the decoupling of our business procedures from our actual YAML. While it's nice to be embedded into the YAML, we may change our mind. We may want to auto deploy things to tests, or tomorrow we may decide we're no longer going to auto deploy the dev. We need an approval procedure. The dev manager needs to say yes before anything goes to our dev site. Those things are just fluid within a business, and to be able to change them in one place and not have to go back and manage hundreds of YAML files. It's just
and forget one of them. Definitely.
So Paul, this is great. And I saw the resource groups you popped up. So we got one more demo. Suresh has a machine learning ops demo. Suresh, if you want to share your desktop, really excited to see that one.
Yeah, in a minute. Let me go ahead and share the couple of links that I'm gonna follow here in the chat. So Sydney, you can share that with the audience as well.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and make sure that shows up on YouTube. Somebody actually has a question. Hey, I have a legacy.NET application and I want to Dockerize it. We have videos on this channel about doing exactly that, Dockerizing our .NET applications. If you want to see a really good example, there's a docs article that talks specifically about the Microsoft preferred Docker file, and that's going to be the number one place to start. And we also have our sample code that we showed earlier at the beginning of the hour, I believe. That was a Dockerized .NET console application. So I'm going to reply to your comment on YouTube directly and give you all these links. I just wanted to let everybody know somebody asked a question on YouTube. And Suresh, I have your hyperlink. I'm going to put that on YouTube too in the comments for everyone who's interested.
Okay, sounds good. Let me know once you start seeing my screen.
All right, we can see your screen.
Cool. Yeah, so this is for the ML ops. So being a data guy, um, I just wanted to make sure provide this all the goodness of the pipelines, the DevOps to the data folks. So coming to the ML ops, the ML engineers are really good in creating those algorithms, but not really having clue on certain areas in the software development lifecycle, things like that. So how do we take those and put that goodness into the DevOps and the ML into ML ops and manufacture those advanced analytics application, which is what we start seeing more and more in terms of personalization, in terms of recommendations. So we see a lot of those right these days. So the architecture that I have here is on the ML ops. So the build pipeline. So I'm leveraging the Azure DevOps. So we can start doing some sanity test and unit test on the data itself, and then also spin up the environment or the resources, which is like the Azure Machine Learning Workspace, so that we can do. And then, once we have those resources created, we can kind of train the model, evaluate the model out of the different algorithms. And once we satisfy that the algorithm is good enough based on the primary metrics that we think it is, then we can go ahead and start registering that in the model management within the Azure Machine Learning. And then we think about how do we take that artifact and operationalize it, package them, deploy them into the Azure Container Instance in a staging and QA way to do the testing of that is a web service. And through a gated deployment, and it could be a manual release gate, start deploying in scale with the Azure Kubernetes services, and we test and push it into production, right? And the whole 9 yards. You do monitoring with the app insights, and then with Azure storage, you store those predictions, what comes out of that model, and then you start leveraging that and go into the retraining pipeline. So then it becomes like the full feedback loop, if you will, right? So I know there is a very good GitHub repo there that implements almost the issue that we looked at. It's called Getting Started with MLOps Python. So it goes in detail some of the steps that you will do to realize this architecture. And definitely you can, I shared the repo, so you can clone it, take it to your repo, and you can start from there. So the way that I had done was I have my Azure DevOps in this organization with this project. So I have these pipelines, everything created. So the first thing with that instruction was, I have to create a variable group. So I go to library, and then I start, putting those different variables and their values, right, if you will. And also I need to connect it to my Azure subscription. So I need to do that with the defining those connections. So I come over here and I define those service connections. As you can see, the resource connection. So when I go, this is already created for you, but then once you, click create, and, you're going to give the name of the connection, and you're going to define the subscription. and the resource group, all that you want, right? So this will be the first step. So once you have that, then I come back to my pipeline, the build pipeline, and then I say, hey, I'm going to create these resources, and so I'm going ahead and saying, hey, this is coming from GitHub repo. And I already cloned that to new MLOps to my repo. So this is with the existing YAML pipeline, and I choose, hey, what is that one? Like, this is like the infrastructure as a code pipeline that you can see.
There's quite a few in there.
There is, of course. Yeah, so I choose this create environment pipeline YAML, and then I click continue. So I'm not going to do this because I already created that for you. So once that is successfully ran, what I'm going to see is something like this, right? So this is actually it is. I think it is just creating. This could be the This is with this YAML pipeline. Let's see, I have that. So this job is run. So it check out of the the repo, and then it deploy the ML resources. Then I come to my Azure subscription, and this is the resource group under which it created for me the workspace. It created the container. It created container instances. We're going to use it for deployment. So that is not created during this time. So it created the application insights, the key vault, the registry, and the storage account, right? So that is what got created out of that. And then I go back, and then I'm going to go back to the instruction. So once I have define these values for the variables, right? So I was able to create the resource group, the workspaces, and all the resources within the workspace. So this is like, which I already defined, created this service connections, and we went through selecting the repo, selecting the infrastructure as a code pipeline. We successfully ran this, and we got that created. So now I'm going to create the workspace along with that. Along with this one, I'm going to create. I'm going to evaluate and trigger the pipeline. So this is going to be going into multi-stage pipeline, which is going to do the continuous integration, training, evaluation, and registration. So that will be our next step. So I'm going to build that. So that's basically is what I have that over here. So you can look at the. So the way I would do is so I clicked on run, and so let's so I chosen the template again, so I create a new pipeline for that, the same way like we did while creating the resource group and other resources in the resource group for the machine learning workspace. Then I come here, and then hey, this is already existing, and then I go ahead and create that, choose the pipeline that I wanted to create. So this is actually doing, so I go ahead and create the diabetes regression CI-YAML. I click continue, but I'm not going to do that because I've already ran that. So let's go ahead and take a look at that, what came out of that run, which is what's this one. Um, and as you can see, the job is doing this multi-stages, which is like, creating the model, and it is doing some testing, and then, it is doing training and evaluating, right? So I can click and see what are some of the things that it went through in terms of the job, right? So steps like, lint test and the unit test, and it published the test results. So that kind of going through all the way to complete the continuous integration pipeline, and then training and evaluating the model with the pipeline here over here, right? So that got created for me using that. So once I have that, I come to the um, pipeline over here, and that actually comes and creates this one for me. So this is like the training. You can see multi-stage, the training the model, evaluating the model, and registering the model, so that I can get it through yaml.azure.com. And once I get authenticated, I can choose the workspace. The workspace is the demo workspace one over here. I can
Suresh,
come and
are you able to maximize the screen, zoom in a little bit more? Might be.
yeah, sure.
There you go. Awesome.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thanks for the feedback. Yeah, so as you can see, training the model, evaluating the model, and registering the model happened, and the pipeline got created here as well, right? And once I click in, it comes back to the experiment, because for the data scientist or for the machine learning engineer, it's all about running that experiment. And I have this, once I register the model, I want to deploy the model, right? So that will be my next thing. That will typically happen to the release pipeline, but with the YAML file, I can do it uh, with the build pipeline itself. So I go ahead and create the new pipeline and do the same thing. You follow the same steps, but you choose the YAML file to do the deployment. So it comes over here and choose my repo, and I choose the existing YAML file, and then I say this is going to be like continuous deployment, right? So this basically, the whole model is predicting the diabetes, if the patient has the diabetes for the given data or not, right? So then I click continue. So it's going to do this deployment. I'm not going to do it because I already have that over here for me created. So I come back, and then we go into deploying into the Azure Container Instance. So I can also deploy to production in scale to Azure Kubernetes services, as well as into the web application or app service, right?
That's
But
actually perfect
just
that you brought that up,
yep.
because that's
Mhm.
actually the next question from the chat. After you run that build pipeline, you want to run your CD pipeline.
Yep.
Where are possible places that you could deploy these models? We see here in this example ACI, AKS, and app service. But are there other places that you see people deploy models to?
Uh, Particularly for the enterprise space, AKS is recommended, but you can, yeah, simply do it as a as a web service. So you can, I mean, there is a good once you deploy it, it comes up with good coding as well, in terms of how do you consume it in kind of calling those uh, from different code bases like the C sharp or from the Python and things like that. But I think majorly it has to be a HTTP, like a web app or app service, AKS is production. It really depends on what you're trying to do out of it, right? So the deployment for Azure Container Instance is good for testing purposes, right? It really depends on what purpose your deployment serves. So in productions, you need to scale, so it needs to do the auto scaling. Then we target deployment is AKS from that perspective.
Yeah, I was going to jump in on this. One of the things I do see occasionally people using Azure Functions as well, deploying there. But one of the big ones that I see, I do a lot of Internet of Things and Azure IoT Edge. So typically, you're not going to deploy directly to that from the pipeline, but what you're going to do is create the deployment manifest, and then you can figure out from there, because usually you do those deployments in sort of rollout stages. You don't just go and deploy continuously. You batch it up and do deployment jobs over groups of devices. But getting them, once the model's in the container registry and you get the deployment manifest, then you got those edge deployments as well.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, because we have these artificial intelligence available at the edge, because a lot of kind of restaurants and the retail stores are leveraging them to provide better customer experience and personalizations. Stacy, I think that's a very valid point. Makes sense.
And I see it a lot in, so I do a lot of automotive and manufacturing. I see it on factory floors and things like that, where that latency is super critical. So you want that model doing inferencing and getting results in milliseconds, so that you're not producing, say, defective products on an assembly line at hyper speeds. You want to be able to stop it before things get way out of hand.
So I think an upcoming popular deployment target would be Azure Container Apps once it gets out of preview. Did I steal your thunder, Sydney?
No worries. It's Kubernetes without the Kubernetes, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Or Kubernetes without the headaches.
I'm waiting for that to happen, where within Azure ML, along with Kubernetes, you're going to see the icon for Azure Container Apps. That's going to be, I think, amazing, especially for like data engineers and data scientists, where that level of abstraction is going to be super helpful for them, I think.
I think they should make the icon for that a big red button that just like hit that. That's easy.
So I'm gonna let Suresh get back to his demo, but one thing I did want to add on to the apps, shameless self plug here, that it allows you to scale down to zero. And that's something that if you're running Azure Kubernetes service or running Kubernetes on your own hardware is difficult to think about and structure. But if you're using container apps and you don't need the model for a certain period of time, the ability to scale down to zero is just super interesting. I think really fits this workflow.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of people use even their computer to do this training, right? So a lot of data scientists, they develop on their local machine, and they kind of deploy and see and do the training, and then for the production they push it out into cloud as well. So that also we have seen. So the target can be remote, the target can be local as well.
Yeah, I think, Suresh, one thing I also want to point out too during the demo, and this is maybe for those of us who are used to it, it didn't even phase us, but we're actually using the term pipeline in a couple of ways here. So we had our DevOps pipeline, and then that actually invoked an Azure Machine Learning pipeline, which was a different kind of pipeline. That's the training pipeline. So if anybody's watching that and they heard the terminology, don't get confused over those. There are two different kinds of pipelines involved in Suresh's demo.
Yeah, no, good point. Yeah. Because with ML pipelines, there is some advantage with that ML pipelines too. Like, if you are using ML pipelines, you can work on multiple different stages, and each stage you can use different compute as well. And ML pipelines provide those capabilities, advantage, that you can reuse those stages from the previous output take that result into the next stage. So that is something also provided. But yeah, you're right. So ML pipeline and the DevOps pipeline is totally different. Yeah. So the last thing that I have is, how do you deploy in batch and then get that over, right? So that is something, you can, so far we have done this one. So the last part that I was thinking was like maybe we can do the batch scoring CI, right? So that is one more pipeline with the Azure DevOps. So again, I go ahead and click pipeline, go into the GitHub, select my repo. So I can do this batch scoring that I can actually do that and then do the continue. But I already have that available. So let's go and take a look at that batch scoring. So this is like, you want to send in bulk of those data that you wanted to, then definitely, this is also offline prediction that you can make and then give out the result, right? So typically we've seen in the healthcare, so they don't give out the result immediately because of compliance reason, plus they have to look into so many things as well, right? So this is like building the batch scoring pipeline with the, kind of a different steps, and then also running the batch scoring and invoking the batch scoring. So that's all I wanted to demo today. But I think it's interesting from the data perspective when we look at the DevOps because it provides those agility and provides a lot of reusability essentially, right? And also saves a lot of time because when data scientist starts, they start in one single like kind of their machine in terms of creating this algorithm. And it almost becomes like monolith, right? So we wanted to kind of, take that algorithm and, stitched into this SDLC process. And that's how we achieve this ML ops to get those advanced analytics application that we see in today's.
Cool demo. I have a question.
Yes.
For the life cycle of your entire model, what kicks off that initial pipeline?
Sure. Yeah. So, it can be a different thing. So it can be the training basically is whenever there is a data drift, it can do that triggering, right? Or also there is a set time, right? The difference between the software development, the algorithm we developed there was machine learning. The model is going to be stale after some time because the data we are going to get is going to be different because it is going to evolve because this day and age we are going to get so many data from the social networking or whatnot because enterprises are trying to make sense of a lot of different data because data is currency. So the model is going to become stale. So they are setting some time like once in 15 days or once in 30 days to train the model and compare that. And basically that's where they evaluate the model, right? The model performance. And depending on that, they kind of registering the model. And that register actually is going to trigger this operationalization.
I see. Okay.
Yeah. Good question, though.
So it's not necessarily like in a web application or anything like that. You're not looking at branches of code or anything like that. You're either running it on a schedule or whenever your model is re-registered.
That is correct.
Or retrained.
Yes. Yep.
Cool.
I think we have one more question about this MLOps demo. For MLOps, how do you see the handoff happen between data scientists and data engineers?
The handoff, you said, Sydney?
Yes. So yeah, this is a question I saw in the chat. Somebody said, "How do you see that handoff? What are some of the challenges customers face implementing this flow?"
Yeah. So when customer starts, right, they start like in a single machine, like it could be like data science virtual machine, DSVM, that all we also have an offering. So they start in like silos, right? And they don't have a clue, when it comes to operationalization. So that's when like hey, how do I take this and think about, and I've seen that used to happen lot of time with the R, because R we didn't have like real good operationalization, but with Python we have more and more those operationalization. People have done the experimentation a lot. Also, we have open source MLOps available through MLflow. That is also providing this. But this is evolving from the ML perspective. It is still evolving. It's not like where the software development lifecycle is, but it is evolving to provide those capabilities to the advanced analytics application. But yeah, mainly I've seen is educating the data scientist about some of the software development lifecycle principles in terms of checking in the code and helping them to do this in scale with respect to adopting, helping them to show the training in the cloud, giving them some idea about compute and things like that, like GPU compute and things like that.
I could jump in on that one too, if you don't mind. I talked to a data scientist a while ago who said that 80% of her job was data engineering. She was in one of those organizations where the data scientists are doing their own data engineering. And for people who don't know the distinction, the data engineering is all about, let's wrangle that data, get it into a format that is useful, and make sure that there are consistent naming conventions, make sure that there's no missing data, interpolate where we have missing values, like all of that stuff that gets the data really prepared for you to start doing modeling. And she said, as a data scientist, she was doing 80% of that before she got to do any actual data science work. In other organizations, and I think this is the question, was about that handoff. In other organizations, those are separate jobs. And even though they blur quite a bit, I think most of the time they blur quite a bit. In some orgs, there's a person who just does the data engineering part of it. And that's the part where I think it's evolving, like how that handoff actually happens and where one stops and the other starts. Because I think it's a constant feedback loop. You'll run an algorithm and you'll go, okay, well, this didn't work because of X. And then the person will go back and try to fix it and recycle and fix the data problem. And then it kind of constantly loops.
Yep.
All right, so this has been phenomenal. I've had a great time. I hope each of you have had a great time here. Thank you so much for joining us for this happy hour. For everybody who hung with us as long as you could live, we are going to continue to have webinars and sessions. So if you're not already subscribed to our YouTube channel, please do. Set up notifications because we go live quite often with our really good, interesting talks like this. That we could be part of the live audience and ask questions. We had a couple good questions today, and so we definitely want to keep that up. But if you got questions after the fact, obviously you could throw them in the YouTube comments. If we see them, we'll try to answer them. But we have also msusdev at Microsoft.com. That's our alias. So if you got questions, you think of something later on, you want to send a question to us, msusdev at Microsoft.com. Matt and I, Matt's usually on. He just had some technical issues today. But Matt and I, if we can't find the answer for you, we'll find somebody who knows the answer. And that's usually our rule of thumb. So for everyone on our panel today, for the happy hour, thank you so much for the demos, the great conversation, and all of your time.
Sounds good.
All right.
Somebody's
Thank you.
Thanks all.
Thanks, everybody. It was fun.
All right,
Take care.
and we'll see you all next time.
All righty.
Happy